What's up, guys? Before I did a video on my experience going to the Tizo touchdown concert, I've done my experience. I think I was talking about eating edibles, but I also talked about going to a Freddie Gibbs concert. But I realized that I don't share, or at least in my opinion, maybe y'all have had enough of it, but in my opinion, enough of my concert / comedy show, not necessarily reviews, but some favorites. I've realized when I look up what is it like to see Denzel Curry live, what is it like to see J. Cole live, what is it like to see Dave Chappelle live, I don't know what comes up from that. There might be some professional reviews for people who perform in New York. Some people might be making YouTube content about it. But I found that when I like an artist, say it's a comedian, I like their YouTube content, I'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, well, their live show wasn't that good. They're good at getting snippets, but to create an hour, they're not my favorite artist. Or a singer who is like, on the album it sounds like this, but it doesn't sound like that in real life. And so I figured I'd start a little series just on the side, as if I don't have enough series going, called, what am I calling it again? What It Was Like At. And it's going to be the artist name after that. So What It Was Like At Freddie Gibbs, What It Was Like at Tizo. And I'm going to talk about the city too, because I see artists in different cities. I've gone to a couple concerts in Michigan in the past year. I've gone to a concert in Wisconsin a few years ago. I went to concerts in Atlanta last year. Went to comedy shows in New York City earlier this year. And then most of the bulk shows I've been to of the last 3 years have all been in Chicago. A lot of this was inspired though because art inspires me. Like seeing these live artists perform regardless of the genre, even if it's a play, whatever. And not to say downplay plays, but I enjoy any type of live art, even art museums. And I feel really inspired leaving some live events. But I also know the price of some of these concerts and comedy shows. It's getting ridiculous. If you want to see a big name act when it comes to rapping, when it comes to comedy, when it comes to singing, it's now minimum, if you go with somebody else, which I'm not saying you need to, but most people go with somebody else, I would say at least $200. And that doesn't count whatever transportation you use to get there. That doesn't count the food / drink you bought there. If it's a comedy show, 2-drink minimum plus tip for a lot of those places. It doesn't count any of those things. So a night out can cost somebody, especially if you want to have a good night out, it can be upwards of $400 to $500. Plus, it could be way more, don't get me wrong. But a night could easily be $300, $350. And so I understand why a lot of people don't go to shows. I understand why a lot of people don't want to take the risk on that bill. I often don't if I don't know that the performer is going to be really good. And this was a long intro to get me just to understand, and for you to understand, and for me to understand what I'm doing here, to be honest. Because these artists that I'm going to present to you, it's mostly going to be all good performances. I'm just going to keep my personal, the ones I don't like very much, to myself. And I say that because it's not my job to bash any artists. These artists go on 50 city tours sometimes or whatever. Even if it's a 12 city tour, the chance that one show isn't going to be their best performance is a high chance. They're going to be off some nights. And if they happen to be off when I go see them, I don't want to be that person that takes a fan away. Because there are some shows I go to and I'm very disappointed. And it sucks. It makes me almost not want to see the artist again. Even like their content. If I felt cheated, especially like they didn't go up and perform how I felt like they should at least tried, or if they're supposed to go do an hour and you get 30 minutes, stuff like that, if you feel tricked when you leave, those are the type of performances that I really am not fond of, but I'm actually probably going to leave them out of this series for the most part for the reasons I said. I'm no one to judge anybody's art or the value of it. It's because it's personal. If I paid $80 for a show and I didn't feel like it was worth $80, the person next to me might have felt like it was worth $300. So it's not really up to me. But to get my first episode started, I'm going to be talking to you guys about Shane Gillis.
The sky is falling. Every Everybody's trying to grab the cloud.
Who I saw in Chicago. This should be 2 weeks ago now, 2 Saturdays ago, here in Chicago at the Chicago Theater downtown in the Loop. I saw him on March 9th, so yeah, 2 weeks ago on Saturday. And what I'm going to do for this series, just to explain it to yourself and myself again, I'm going to talk about the demographics, so who is there, who you surrounded with in the crowd, and that's not necessarily a big deal, but I feel like it's something that should be brought up. I'm going to talk about the vibe. I'm going to talk about the size of theater I'm in. That's going to include the vibe, because sometimes when you're a huge theater, small place, small venue, it's just a whole different, not sometimes, it's always a completely different experience. I'm going to talk about ticket prices a little bit, and that's not the most important thing in my opinion, because if you really love an artist and it's within your means somewhat, a lot of times people will stretch to get these tickets. But I do feel like it's important to discuss them, because some of these artists are so expensive that you either need to catch their pre-sale and catch their ticket super early, or maybe you need to try to find them at a festival and just pay a lot of money, but to see a lot of artists, there's different ways of going about it. I'm also going to discuss show quality, so I'm going to get into how much I enjoyed the show in terms of really why I enjoyed the show, why I thought it was a quality show, because I told you I'm going to mostly present you with people that I like, or people, at least performances that I've liked. And then for concerts, I'm going to talk to you guys about whether you can smoke there. Some concerts are so open, some artists are so open with their smoking in the crowd, whatever. Some places and artists, and a lot of times I really think it's the booking company, like the Live Nations and the Lyrical Lemonade host some people, and the Speaker Box out here host people, like these companies that play middleman for the venue and the artist, and then they provide security. I feel like a lot of times the smoking is on them, but regardless, I'm just going to tell you whether I was allowed to smoke, because if it's a concert, it's an 88% chance I'm going to try. So when it comes to Shane Gillis, the demographic at the Chicago Theater that night, it was an air of conservative white men. I'll just put it that way. And I'm not going to put it as a negative thing. I'm not going to put it as a positive thing. But that's who you were mostly sitting with. And then some of their girlfriends. But a lot of it looked like frat brothers getting together and going to these shows. He sold out 5 nights here in Chicago. And you could tell by the jokes he makes that that's who he's like pandering to. And I'm not calling Shane Gillis conservative. I'm not calling him liberal. I think he attacks both sides. I think his comedy is genius. I just want people to know the feel that's in the room. Because if you're black like me, you're not about to see probably a ton of black people at a Shane Gillis show. If you're a woman, you're probably not about to see huge groups of women going together to a Shane Gillis show. You're going to see a lot of white men in like Patagonia jackets and boots and stuff and blue jeans or whatever. Some with their girlfriends, some not, at a Shane Gillis show. Let's move on to the vibe. The vibe in the room as he was telling the jokes was completely free. Him and his openers, it seemed like felt free to try some of their edgier jokes. It didn't feel constrained. Sometimes you go to a comedy show and it feels like that comic is really trying to fit their comedy into like some type of censor, into something. And I get how comedy has to be told, but it didn't feel like that night. It felt like anything could be said by any comic that went up there, and I love that. That's the type of comedy I like. I don't want censored comedy. I don't want boring comedy. I'm not even a huge fan of clean comedy. I can listen to it, but I don't need family-friendly comedy. I'm not going with children or anything like that. So the vibe in there was like, oh no, these guys are one, professionals, because Shane Gillis is so big and so on top of the game that his openers are going to be good. And so it was a very, very professional vibe, but it was also, these guys could say anything. Also with the vibe, I wasn't in a comedy club. Like I said, the Chicago Theater, I looked it up, is a 3,600 person venue. It's a huge space. I was on the top deck, low on the top deck, so I had a perfect view of the stage. I don't think I even have a picture, because you're not supposed to take pictures of videos or anything. I think you could take a picture at the beginning or so. I didn't even take a picture. I was trying to really be there present in the moment, but because of the size of the place, the comic has to be used to telling jokes in 3,000 person theaters, and all the comics up there were professionals. It was exciting. You know, it was exciting because like everybody's there to see Shane Gillis, and Shane Gillis performed at a certain level, and I'm gonna get to that later, but the vibe also was exciting just in the building, just when you know a good comic's coming up, and then when each comic that's opening is just getting better and better and better. It was the ideal comedic situation, because comedy has a flow, it has a trajectory where it's supposed to start, and it start as a deep growl of a laugh type shit to roaring laughter with the main comic, and that's what happened. It was that perfect trajectory that a comic would really want. One of the best combinations of it I've ever seen from top to bottom, in terms of the opener who did his 15 minutes to Shane doing his hour. Everybody killed. So along with that, when you go see big comics, they could have anybody open. Like, they could have another pretty big comic open for them because of how big they are. Like, Shane's one of the biggest for sure in America at this point in time right now. And because of that, he was able to get Andrew Santino as an opener. And he went up there and did 20 to 30 minutes right before Shane Gillis. And it was like, you got a 2-for-1 of professional comics. I've never even been the biggest Andrew Santino fan, and he went up there and killed. He's from Chicago. This is his home, so it made sense. And Chicago has so many comics that it wouldn't have been hard to find like a star. And them being friends, it was a great show. So right now, I don't have the perfect order down yet, so just work with me. But right now, I'm going to talk about the ticket prices. I got him pre-sale. He announced it and put the code on his Instagram. And I went and bought the tickets probably the day they came out, or the next day, maybe. Probably the day they came out. No, I'm tripping. It wasn't the next day. It was within 2 hours of him announcing them on Instagram. I think I had known about them before, and I set an alarm and like waited for them or whatever. But the tickets I got, which were a great seat, were I think $56 each, and after fees came out to $150. And then the day before, I was looking at the resale value of them, and for whatever reason, I think the artist sets this, but I couldn't just resell them for whatever price I wanted to. So Ticketmaster was willing to buy them back for me for $250, I believe, maybe $300. So it would have doubled the money I spent, and I was torn. I'm a man who could use $300 or $150 on top of the little investment I already made, and somebody would have bought them because tickets were flying off the shelf. No, Ticketmaster was automatically going to buy them. And then if I tried to sell it through StubHub, somebody had bought 2 tickets for like $600 together. Like, I think people were paying up to like $300 for tickets. Like I said, he's one of the biggest comedians in the world right now, and he performed on SNL. Like, in our community, SNL isn't huge, but I get on the American scale, if you perform on SNL, it still does a lot for your career. It still is a proving ground for comedy. It's still a platform that can catapult you to another realm, even if you're big. And so if he was able to sell out 3 shows, 4 shows, I feel like SNL could add that sold out 5th show. Like, you could have maybe filled at 80% capacity, but sold it out because that SNL. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think SNL has that type of power still. And with that being said, his ticket prices were going up, and I was torn on whether to sell them or not. And moving into the quality of the show, because this ties into the ticket price, I do not regret keeping the tickets. It was a great experience. As I said earlier in the video, it was very professional comedy. And if you're a comedy fan, you know what I mean. Like, they respected the craft. They went up there and they gave you a professional 15 to 20 minutes for his opener. Andrew Santino gave you an excellent 30 minutes. And Shane Gillis came up and did an excellent hour with new material. He got hoed a little bit in a way, because some of his new material he did on SNL. That's just the way SNL works. I know when Lauren, that's his name, right? The main head guy for SNL calls you, you just have to give him your best set that you have right now. Your best, 10-minute monologue that you get on SNL. And so we heard probably 10 to 15 minutes of his set. But 10 to 15 minutes out of 60 minutes of material that you've kind of heard, and he took the jokes further. There were things that he couldn't say on SNL that he was able to say in real life. It was excellent. I couldn't have really asked for a better comedy show. If I had, I would have felt greedy. I would have felt like, you didn't appreciate that? Like, that's one of those, and he got a standing ovation as he walked off. Like, it was that type of show. And so for somebody who likes to cling on to their money, let me tell you, I could have doubled my money that day by giving these tickets off automatically to Ticketmaster, and I didn't do that. I went to the show, and it was worth it. I'm not going to get into the content of the comedy. If you want to know the types of jokes Shane Gillis tells, I would just type his name into YouTube. But it is definitely like man's man comedy, which I think most comedy is at the end of the day. Like, there's some comedy that's good for every demographic, but most people have a demographic or a lane that they tell jokes in, and they're excellent for their fans in that lane. That's just how it is. And they range outside of it sometimes, but the person lives a certain life, and their jokes in their life represent a certain thing, and certain people are going to gravitate to that. So it's definitely mostly men's comedy, but I've never met a man, I don't think, that didn't say Shane Gillis was funny. Maybe one or two. And I'm sure they're out there, don't get me wrong. But if you go watch his Austin special on YouTube and tell me that that man's not funny, I'm just like, it's just not your type of comedy, you know? That dude, he's a killer. Guys, this show, What It Was Like At, this is the first episode. I appreciate you guys working through this a little bit difficult episode with me. Shane Gillis in Chicago on March 9th, 2024 was a hell of a show. I hope to see him again one day. I'm sure when he comes back, his ticket prices will be $600. Hopefully, I'll be at a different financial status in my life when that comes around. And if not, I'll just catch his next Netflix special. I'll see you guys next time.